Okay, we're here pretty much with the backdrop of St James's. This video that's coming up, if you want to watch the full video, we're going to be looking at last season's predictions, where we predicted the top 20 Premier League predictions, see exactly how well we did, how terrible we did. Top goal scorer, all them predictions. We're here with Lewis as well. We're going to rank each other's video and look a little bit at next season, so make sure you follow the video link below. Right, okay then, so we're here with a follow-up video. Now, if you followed the channel for a long time, you'll know one of the first videos that we did was looking at season predictions going into this season. We're here with Lewis. Lewis, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi there, my name's Lewis at Mr. Lewis Thompson on Twitter.
Yeah, perfect. So, the start of the season, we looked, the day the transfer window was ending, we looked at this to give fairness. A lot has happened since then. It's been a mad all season, probably more so than normal. I think at the start.
Better for some.
Better for some, a lot better for, a lot worse for some. Look in particular at the start of the season, we both predicted, like many others, it was going to be a two-horse race between Liverpool and Man City.
Yeah.
What went wrong?
Well, I think a lot of people said that it would be a two-horse race, and I don't think we were in the minority with that sort of prediction. But I mean, as people have been calling out for a long time, we want to see a more competitive Premier League, and that's what we got this season. And we all thought Arsenal would maybe get there, but it just didn't work out. And as for Liverpool, yeah, there's a lot going on there, and a lot needs change. But yeah, we're going to get into that. So
yeah, well, you've got the inside track. You're a Liverpool fan.
Yep.
Was it just the bad start of the season that seemed to do it? The second half seemed to be fantastic. It was almost a case of nearly catching up to top four at one stage. But was it just this first half?
Well, from watching our video at the start of the season, I think a common theme. I sort of noticed the way teams started. It sort of reflected how they sort of went on to finish that season, and I mean immediately from drawing with Fulham, Palace back-to-back, Nunes getting sent off, it just didn't really set a standard for the rest of the season. And I was thinking about this earlier. I mean, the amount of games we played last season, that's a big factor. But then you've got to start to look at things like the players getting too comfortable, and we became the team that teams didn't want to play to the team that people wanted to play every week. And it just became a factor of, yeah, we knew how to beat these guys, and yeah, we go back to the midfield, but yeah, there's lots to talk about.
Do you think it was the midfield? Because that seems to be, from the outside perspective, it seemed that.
Well, I mean, the last few weeks we've seen in the transfer window, Jurgen's heavily going to target the midfield area, and we've brought in this sporting director from Wolfsburg. Alexis is looking to be made official this week, I hear, from Brighton for 45 million. So yeah, I think that's the main area. But you look at the whole team. I mean, I think the only person that could hold their head up high is Alisson this season. I think without him, we could have been looking at a Chelsea sort of mid-table finish. But I think the players just got too comfortable in their boots from last season, from fighting for 4 trophies to fighting for none, and now we're in the Europa League. But yeah, like other teams, there's a big building process.
I mean, there's a few. If you look at Spurs, Chelsea, there's been a few shockers this season. So we'll get into it, because we'll touch at all of the teams in a bit then. So the first prediction that we had was Golden Boot. So we both went for Haaland for this one. Obviously, hands down, definitely Haaland.
Yeah.
So we got one right. Before we get into all the ones that we got wrong, we had some shockers. Haaland we both obviously nailed on.
Yeah, I said I think Haaland could win the Golden Boot and even break Salah's 32 goal record, and that's exactly what he did do. I mean, I remember we recorded our video slightly a few games into the season, and he'd scored a back-to-back hat-trick, so I don't think it was too much of a wild prediction to say that Haaland would win the Golden Boot, and he did. And I mean, what a player he's been, and it looks like City are going to go on and do the treble. So
first season, insane. He's probably going to break every single record in the Premier League if he stays long enough. He's so young.
It's ridiculous.
It's really
22, is he?
Yeah, so much potential.
Yeah.
If he can come in and hit the ground like that, it's scary for the Premier League. So that won in both of our columns then. So the next thing we predicted was the top 3 summer transfers.
Yeah.
So
Not January.
it was surprising this, because we didn't look at each other's answers before, but we had exactly the same answers. So we had Haaland number 1.
In the same order as well.
Yeah, exactly the same order, which was perfect. We nailed that one. Next one was Jesus. His is a bit of a season of two halves almost. The first half fantastic, and then injuries and a few things blighted
World Cup
his.
period, he was sort of missing due to injuries, but then he sort of came back into the team during the end of the season. But I feel like with Jesus, if he'd have had an injury-free run, he could be up there with the Tonys and the Keanes in terms of the goal scoring. But he has so much potential, Jesus, and you could see how effective he was in that Arsenal team with Martinelli and Saka, who went on to have a brilliant season, both of them. But I don't think we were too off there with
No,
Jesus.
I think when we look back at Jesus in particular, we mentioned, oh, I can't believe Man City let him go. They've replaced him with a World Cup winner, a younger one, so it's Man City down to a T. Third, this is the absolute one of the shockers that we had, but it's on paper, it seemed like the right decision at the time.
I wouldn't really call it a shocker because it's sort of all of Chelsea that have been a disappointment this season, but I feel like he would have been one of the players that they were counting on at the start of the season to come in and make sort of a big impact, along with the likes of Enzo Fernandez, Koulibaly, other players that they've signed. But it just hasn't worked out for them this season. But I feel like under Poch next season they could build something at Stamford Bridge.
So I mean, we're talking about Sterling here, and you know the attributes he's got. He plays for England, he gets goals, he gets assists, he's got pace to burn. He was a kind of obvious choice for third. It's just not worked out. And do you think Chelsea might be looking to move him on next season, or not? New manager, so I suppose everyone will be getting assessed.
Well, I've heard Felix. I've heard they're not going to sign him in a permanent. Don't know whether that's Poch, the owners. Don't know what that is. But I think Sterling's a player you have to keep by your side with the Premier League experience he has.
Got goals in him still, surely.
Three titles, he's got now, and he definitely has goals in him. And you've seen this season that he can be good when he wants to be, and he's popped up a few times and scored a few good goals. But as I said, I think it's sort of just the whole team in general, a bit like Liverpool rather than one individual.
Goals for so many great attacking players, it's mad how they're struggling for goals. They literally should have goals from midfield, they should have goals on the wing, up front.
I think you mentioned that in the video that there was a lack of a striking presence, and that was quite a weird thing, that the one player that they didn't sign was an out-and-out striker, and
they let Lukaku
using
go.
Havertz, who now has been linked to a Real Madrid move, which I don't really understand.
I don't rate him.
It just wasn't going to work out. But then the likes of Lukaku, you never know what he could come back and do next season in the number 9 spot. But I do think they need to go out there and find like your man at Napoli, Osimhen, someone like that to come in and score goals.
Well, it should be clear out there, surely, because the financial fair play and stuff, it should be ridiculous.
I don't really know how that whole thing works. I don't think anyone does, to be honest.
I don't even know how they've done it, so we'll see what happens in the next few windows with them. So the next prediction that we did was the best transfer window. Now, this was just the summer. Obviously, we've had January, which kind of makes this a lot harder. So people out there who are judging in the comments and stuff, it is very hard to do when you don't know what happens in January. So summer transfer window, I had Nottingham Forest. Now, I was surprised that they did so much activity. I thought they had signed a lot of good players. I thought the keeper was great. I thought the left back, that Lodi, looked great. I even thought Lingard looked great at the time. I don't know what on earth's happened to him, but this was one of the ones that we thought it was a great window if they stay up. It's a terrible window if they go down. It was so close towards the back end of the season. Literally a couple of games could have swung it, but it ended up being that was the case. So I think I'll give myself half or a full point for that one.
Yeah, well, it could have went either way for Nottingham Forest this season, and I think the two main ones that one of them we'll get into later, Brennan Johnson and Morgan Gibbs-White, have really scored the goals and done bits for Forest this season. But yeah, as you said, it was sort of, I think we talked about this in the last video, it was sort of like a Fulham don't know what season that was, where
risky.
They signed a whole lot, getting rid of their championship players who got them up. But I mean, you can't give anything negative. They've stayed up and they've done the job and they've stuck with Steve Cooper.
Yeah, and you went for Tottenham, which now looking back seems like a bad shout, but at the time, the players that they had Richarlison, who'd just come off the back of a World Cup. He looked like a world beater. They had Basuma, who they signed from Brighton, who seemed like he'd make Brighton tick. There was worry about Brighton. How are they going to cope without him? Spencer just signed from Middlesbrough, wasn't it?
No, from Nottingham Forest. Jed Spence,
Forest.
he ended up on loan to Stade Rennais in France. It went in January, so that didn't work out for them.
They had Longley from
Basuma,
Barcelona as well. Perisic,
Longley, Barcelona on loan. I think the thing with Spurs was they were sort of like Sterling at Chelsea. They really needed to rely on them players, and not because we've seen how unbelievable Harry Kane's been this season. I mean, put him in that City team and you're probably talking about one of the best players in the world at the minute, even though you could argue that at the moment.
Just a little side note, where do you fancy him moving off to? Is he going to stay, do you reckon?
Side note, I think he would suit Man United. Harry Kane. I don't. Real Madrid, Man United. If I'm him, I think there's a thing in him, he wants to break Shearer's record, and he's got that in the back of his head. But I mean, he can pretty much choose anywhere, Harry Kane. I think he would win a lot more trophies at Real Madrid, but he's definitely got it in him, and I think he would like to stay in the Prem.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's only really Man U or Chelsea. I mean,
don't need him.
Would we blow our budget on him? I think Eddie Howe's doing everything quite shrewd, and I think that the money that would have to take to get him would be 3 players, or using up most of a transfer budget. So
Yeah.
I think Man U are probably in the money bags position where they could afford him. They
Definitely.
do need a striker, that's their weakness. And Chelsea obviously need I don't know if
Yeah.
the rivalry between them two clubs might cloud them from going there, but
Going back to Spurs,
Yeah.
as I was saying, they really needed these signings to work out for them. I mean, Kane's been their only main output this season. Son's had a bit of a disappointing season. But I think if the likes of Richarlison, Basuma stepped up and had the season that they had the season before,
Yeah.
I mean, Perisic had a relatively good season under Conte, and then it sort of went all a bit sickening when the whole Conte fallout thing happened in the press conferences.
Basuma as well, though. He
Yeah,
was fantastic.
really
I
good
thought,
player.
what a player he's going to be.
I don't know. I think Conte's tactics, play style, just didn't really work out for a few of them, as we've seen with their league position.
Yeah, so it seems like it's a shocker for you, Tottenham, then. I've got a load covered and a load back. But yeah, Tottenham, terrible season for them. I think you mentioned possible title challenge, which didn't really sound like a bad shout at the
No.
time. They've just collapsed.
Yeah, I mean, Kane and Son had come out of a brilliant season, but I think another thing to mention with them, and another common trend we've seen this season, is teams playing in Europe haven't done so well in the league. I mean, Liverpool, we fell off massively. Chelsea, 12th place. Spurs aren't even in the top 6. They've missed out in the Conference League, which I think their fans will be thankful for as well. West Ham, who, looking back in the video, we had up quite a high finish. And although
Big surprise.
they're in the final of the Conference League, but
No.
they just haven't produced that form in the Premier League this season. So yeah, I think that's played a factor on a few clubs this season playing in Europe.
Right, okay, so up next then, so we looked at the worst transfer window. Now, for this one, I think this is probably a good shout looking back at it. I said Leicester. So, Leicester had sold Schmeichel, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. Leadership qualities and stuff. And then Fofana they got rid of as well. Never really replaced. And it turns out, for me anyway, looking at it, Leicester's back 5, whatever, was the weakness. That's probably the reason they got relegated. Ship goals in every single week. It was almost like the entertainers up here, where you had to score 4 goals because you know you're going to concede 3. But obviously they weren't scoring that as well.
Yeah, I remember us talking about when we were making that video, Fofana had just been sold to
Big money.
Chelsea, and we were expecting them to bring in some really good signings. But I remember saying in the video that the only thing that would keep them up this season is Brendan Rodgers, and that didn't work out for them. They brought in Dean Smith, and yeah, it just didn't go well. The only real talent Leicester have had this season are the likes of Harvey Barnes, Maddison. It seems like they'll be moving on, so they're in a bit of a sticky situation.
We'll be talking about next season a little bit at the end, but what do you put the downfall of Leicester this season was? Was it the money wasn't invested? Was it the keeper not being replaced?
I mean,
or
as
what?
you said, a lack of leadership from Schmeichel. But yeah, I mean, looking at their defence, sometimes you would have put that defence in a championship team, and they would have suited that perfectly. But I just don't know. They were losing those really important games to the lower league sides that they really could have done with winning, you know. But it's hard to put a finger on things. Sometimes it's just the team aren't playing as well. Maybe Maddison had it in his head that he wants to leave, stuff like that. But yeah, not too sure.
You went for Bournemouth. Now, obviously, since then, their form's changed. They've got new owners. Everything changed. But at the start, I think everyone's seen Bournemouth as the whipping boy of the Premier League. They signed Tavernier. That was one of their signings.
Yeah.
How would you looking back, rate that decision and then that transfer window?
Well, I think after we saw them conceding 9 goals at Anfield, I don't think there would have been a single person that would have said, football fan that would have said that Bournemouth will stay up this season. I mean, all the top pundits, Carragher, Neville, were all saying Bournemouth.
They had Scott Parker. This is how long ago it was. Yeah.
It's like 2 different seasons almost. Looking back on it, I mean, you said yourself about Bournemouth that they were the one team you would have put money on to go down, but I mean, what a job Gary O'Neill's done. He's came in, kept them up, and yeah, I've been proven wrong. But at the start of the season, you would have said Bournemouth starts to go down.
I think everyone would have done, and that's the thing when we look at the 3 teams that are going to go up in the Premier League. A lot's still going to change, and there's always maybe one team that's going to surprise people.
Yeah.
Breakout star of the season. So again, I'm quite pleased with my shout here.
You were
I
spot
said
on with
Botman.
that.
Yeah, absolute breakout. Kind of unknown a little bit to the Premier League. He's come in. He's in most people's team of the season as one of the defenders. If not, he's in the substitute bench. He's thereabouts. It seems like he's a top 4 player, definitely, whether Newcastle qualified or not. Seems like he could probably get into any team. So, yeah, happy with that one. You went for Elliott at Liverpool. Now, is game time, how would you rate it? You're a Liverpool fan, so you're probably
Yeah.
more qualified to answer this
Well,
one. What have you thought of his game time and his performances?
I felt like the reason I chose him at the start of the season was because Klopp had come out and said that he wants to put more trust in the players that he had, which he'd done, and a lot of fans were uncomfortable with that because of the lack of midfield signings. And he was showing great promise at the start of the season. I remember home to Newcastle, he was very good, and he's still young. You have to remember, I wrote in my notes, I wasn't far off, but he hasn't had the season that maybe some would expect, and the likes of Curtis Jones coming through the ranks, showing his quality towards the latter end of the season. I mean, I still think he's a great player, but he just hasn't been the expectations to class as a breakout star of the season compared to someone like Botman, you know.
Out of 10, what would you rate his performances this season then?
He's 6, 7,
Six,
6,
have
7.
a
But
good season?
it's hard because, again, it's rather the whole team than and for such a young player to be counting on him to play in that midfield three alongside the likes of Henderson, Fabinho, who maybe were off and on at the start of the season. But yeah, I would say there's still plenty of time for him to get back at it. Yeah.
And maybe will be this season. We'll obviously do the next season's prediction after the transfer window, but the next one that we had, and I've had a bit of a shocker here as well, is young player of the season. Now, I put Anthony Gordon. Now, looking back, this wasn't done in January. This was done at the start of the season. He was at Everton at that stage. Yeah, they just turned down a £60 million bid from Chelsea. They ended up in January accepting a lower bid for Newcastle. Again, for him, it was a season of two halves. He was doing okay at Everton. He was obviously getting loads of game time. You could analyse his performances. He's not really done much for Newcastle. He's not had the opportunity. He's come on 10 minutes here, 15 minutes, 45 minutes. He's been hooked off a few times. His performances have not been great.
Clip at Bournemouth.
Yeah, I think if you ask most Newcastle fans, they would say a 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10 season. But again, young, loads of potential. But for the young player of the season, got that horrendously wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe if he'd have stayed at Everton, would have seen a little bit more. I feel that's probably one of the reasons why they were in the relegation mess. They sold him, never replaced them. I think maybe if they'd kept them, they would have had a few more goals. It would have been a bit more comfortable for them than what it ended up.
I also feel like if he'd maybe got the move in the summertime, then we could be talking about him having a much better season. I remember putting a bet on him to go to Newcastle in the summertime, but maybe that's just played in his head, the whole will I end up in Newcastle, will I not, and it just didn't happen in January. But again, you've got a young player with bags of potential, so you never know where he could go.
And then you went for Saka, so you've got 1 point for that one, I would say. Yeah,
good decision. I mean, it was a fairly obvious pick at the start of the season. I mean, 14 goals, 11 assists. I think everyone knows how good Arsenal and Saka, Martinelli have been this season. But yeah, what a season they've had, and I think there's lots more to come from him. Yeah,
and then this one, I would say we probably both got this wrong, maybe, but at the just to point out, we said it was the worst signing was Morgan Gibbs-White, but the only reason we said that, looking back, was because of the transfer fee. It wasn't because of him as a player. It was around 42 million with add-ons and different stuff like that. So 42 million for a young player seemed very, very heavy. Could he live up to that? He probably has lived up to quite a lot of it. Maybe, I don't know if he's hit the 42 million, but he's not been far off if he hasn't, because he's been one of their stars of the season. Do you think that's a plus, a win, or what?
You were saying you will be eating our words at the end of the season if he does come good. And as I said earlier, I think he was one of the players that has kept Forest up this season. He's really showed his quality, and he's almost justified that price tag. 5 goals, 8 assists. I mean, you can't really ask for much more than one of your big money signings. And yeah, he could go on to do big things in the Premier League.
Worth every penny, do you reckon, looking back at it?
I think he needs another season to show really his Premier League quality, but I think he's definitely getting there.
Yeah. And then player of the season. Now we kind of played it safe with both of this. I had Haaland, you had De Bruyne. I would probably say Haaland is, just because he'd probably dominate everything, but at the time we said I'll pick Haaland for goals, you pick De Bruyne for assists. They've done exactly what was expected, really.
Yeah, I mean, I said Kevin De Bruyne will help City win the league and maybe even the Champions League, and they've got a Champions League final in a week's time. So yeah, I think we were both spot on there. Again, quite obvious picks, but I mean, how good has Kevin De Bruyne been this season? He's probably the best midfielder in the world, and Haaland best forward in the world. So City are laughing right now.
Champions League prediction?
I would really, really, really love Inter Milan to win the Champions League, but I can't see. I mean, everyone's been talking about could Man United beat them in the FA Cup final. That didn't happen. They've won the league. I think City will win it and go on to do the treble.
I think I have to. I think I'd like to see an English team win anyway, but I expect them to. Honestly, if you put Barcelona, Real Madrid, Liverpool, Man U, I expect
that
Man City to
4-0
beat
against
everyone.
Real Madrid was just
They're just ridiculous.
they're just unbelievable, and the depth they have in their team, they could field 2 very good lineups every game each season, you know.
And it's scary if they win. Well, even if they don't win, they're going to have a big transfer budget again. What do you
Well,
do with that
there's
squad?
a bit of financial fair play coming in, similar with Everton, which could affect them, but we'll see how that goes.
Well, Champions League money, if they win the Champions League, that'll
Yeah,
help lighten
yeah.
that load. So, next one was biggest bargain. Now, I went for Eriksen. Now,
Yeah.
I'd noted with this, I was very surprised that only Bournemouth and Man U were interested. Looking back at it, obviously, hindsight's a great thing. I look back at it, and he did have the whole heart defect, and maybe that was the only reason that was probably putting people off back then.
Yeah.
He's had a full season, looks full health, no concerns with it or whatever. Looking back at it, there should have been a ton of clubs in for him on a free. Eriksen.
I mean, you couldn't have got much better with that answer. He's been good this season, 25 starts, 8 assists. There's not really free transfer, and he's shown he's still at the level he was at Spurs at times.
Yeah, I think looking back at it now, I think a lot of clubs will be kicking themselves thinking we should have went in
Definitely.
for him.
Maybe Brentford to try keep him as well.
Yeah. You went for Perisic at Spurs.
Yeah, Perisic, I mean, he was one of the players that I thought at Spurs could have stepped up. I mean, under Conte, he won the Serie A under Conte for Inter Milan, and he just seemed to slot into that left wing back role really early on. I remember us talking about the fantasy points that he was.
Assist
Yeah,
king,
he was getting it earlier on. 8 assists in 23 starts. I mean, again, just like Eriksen on a free transfer, you can't really ask for much more than that, can you?
Yeah. The only thing is it's not really him. It's a team effort. But Spurs is leaky defence this season.
It's really just been Harry Kane has really
Bailed
saved
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we've got biggest flop. Now, this is probably the worst shout that I've done
I
for
think
the
this is
full
your worst
thing.
one
Yeah,
yet.
yeah, horrendous. So I'd went for Martinez for Man U. Now, this was on the basis. Now, when we did this, we didn't do it before a ball was kicked. We did this at the end of the transfer window, which is probably the fairest thing to do because you can't do all these predictions without knowing how the transfer window is going to land. I went for Martinez. Now, he'd been manhandled, if we say. He was short. He didn't really have an aerial dominance. So at the time, I think it was probably an okay shout, but it's turned out he's had a fantastic season. He's been crucial to Man U's defence, and he's probably one of the stars of the season, or best transfers rather than the worst. He should probably be up there rather than my Sterling prediction.
Yeah, well, as Carragher said, it's like his biggest surprise this season. He's had to come out in Sky Sports and apologise about what he said about him. But yeah, I think it just goes to show it's all about the technicality as well as the physicality side of things. But yeah, he's been great alongside Varane at times this season, and yeah, I mean, you look back and that's a very poor choice from yourself.
Horrendous. But this is the thing, looking back, it's a big difference.
It is.
But you went for Calvin Phillips, and I would say that's nailed on.
Yeah, well, Calvin Phillips at Man City, I think everyone was a bit confused at the time why
It was overkill a little bit, wasn't it?
It wasn't.
needed.
It was like, why do you need him? And he just hasn't got much game time. But I've heard the past few weeks he's come out and said he wants to fight for a spot at Man City, which is fair enough.
Could you see him getting in, do you reckon? Because he's got competition. He's never going to get ahead of Rodri.
I mean,
Rodri's been ridiculous.
He's still young, and he was one of England's main players, and alongside Declan Rice. But I mean, he's went to Man City, and he's going to have 3. He's going to have a Champions League winners' medal, a Premier League winners' medal, and FA Cup winners' medal. So if he's went to win trophies, and that's what he's done, but it's just whether he would rather sit in the bench for the rest of his career or get some game time for a top team.
Would you put it down as a wasted year of his career?
It's hard to tell because he could have went and learned so much off Pep and the players around him, and with players getting older at Man City, he could feel like he could battle his way in. I mean, you never know that this time next season we'd be saying Calvin Phillips had an amazing season for Man City if he gets the game time that he had at Leeds, but it's just hard to say. But at the minute you would say, why would he do that? But then Leeds have gone down now, so you could make any argument.
Well, I mean,
really.
It's not really costing him his England place. He seems to still be fancied by Southgate, even though he's not playing.
Southgate has a select few that he always picks, Maguire, etc.
Yeah, even though when he first came in, it was famous that he said people are going to be on form. Hasn't been the case, right? So now we look at our full league. So we'll flash this up on screen so everyone can see this, but we'll do it in segments first then. So top 4 predictions. So I'll run through mine first. So the way that I scored this was if we got the team that finished in the exact place, it was 3 points. if they were one slot off what we'd anticipated, it's two slots off is 1 point, and anything else is a 0. So
Yeah.
I got 3 points first for Man City. That was absolutely nailed on. I think it was in doubt for a lot of the season. It looked like Arsenal might do it. I went for Liverpool second. I'm still shocked how they're nowhere near that. I got 0 points for that. I'd predicted the Spurs. In fact, we'll do this the same. I think we've got the
Yeah,
the
we
same
have the
top
exact
four.
same top four, yeah.
And then we went for Arsenal fourth. So we got exactly the same points for that one. Top four, totally different to what we'd predicted. Total
Yeah.
shock with Spurs in particular. Obviously, no one expected Arsenal to do as well as they had. Bottom three is probably the biggest sort of surprise. So relegation now, similar. We both had Bournemouth. We thought they would be the whipping boys again. Very obvious at the start of the season, which hasn't turned out. This is where we differed a little bit. So I'd went for Brentford second bottom. What a great shout that was. They've had a fantastic season. To be fair, the concern that I noted is I said, if Ivan Toney got injured, they would miss him, and that would destroy their season. But he has been missing for certain games, and they've won. They've not looked like they've missed him.
Yeah.
So he's got a big. Is it 8 months that he's out for with the betting ban? I know a lot of that's going to be pre-season,
He's
but
out till after Christmas anyway. I think
Yeah.
I can recall correctly.
January, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
so-
I had Brentford finishing in 13th. They ended up 9th. I remember saying Tony and Buemo, and I mentioned about Ben Mee. I think they signed him on a free from Burnley.
great signing as
Great
well.
signing he's turned out to be. And Thomas Frank, I think I mentioned as well the sort of atmosphere that these teams like Brentford, Forest are able to build at home and get the fans behind them. But I mean, what a job Brentford have done. A top 10 finish, no complaints there.
Yeah, so you'd went for Southampton, so you got 2 points for that one. So they ended up being the whipping boys almost.
Yeah, I think I said for Southampton they were a few injuries away from having a really, really poor run. They've had to rely on Ward-Prowse on multiple occasions this season. They had a great start to this, a decent start to this season, and then it just all went wrong. Really, they got rid of Hasenhüttl, and now they're going to enjoy a season in the Championship.
Yeah, I said Everton were going to get relegated, and you had Nottingham Forest. Now, this could have been a case of either one of us got that
either
right.
or.
It's just one match probably determined that. So Everton, I thought very, very lucky. I think at one stage I would have probably bet money on them going down. They just seemed devoid of confidence. It seemed that the fans were doing the best they could, rattling up with the blue smoke, everyone looking like Smurfs outside. You had Forest. Now, again, it could have been stayed up. How would you analyse both of them choices looking back as well?
Well, yeah, as you said, it really did come down to the last game of the season. I remember saying in the video, I think Everton will just about avoid the drop, but then they could have easily went down. I think Forrest, the owner especially, will be glad he stuck to the decision to keep Steve Cooper in, and it seems like the players have got behind him and his philosophy, and they've started really playing as a team. Sean Dyche just came into Everton and he's done the job. I think he got 500,000 or close to $1 million for keeping them up. But yeah, I mean, both teams will be happy. So.
Yeah, and then if we look at what we had a bit further up the team then, so after the top four, I had Chelsea, Man U and Newcastle. You had Chelsea, Man U, Newcastle. So this is another case of we never seen each other's answers before. We predicted that. We predicted a good season for what we thought would be a good season for Newcastle at 7th. We thought they were going to be the best of the rest. Obviously, we've had Spurs collapse, Chelsea collapse.
Yeah.
How would you rate them choices? So Chelsea's obviously up there. We had that 5th.
Yeah.
Shocking seeing them in the bottom 10 when you see the graphic and they're in the bottom half of the league.
I mean, I said I don't think Havertz up front is going to get you many goals, and it hasn't. And I did mention that they could be in trouble this season. It's a weird one with Chelsea. All these big names that they've brought in, and they've just completely crumbled. I mean, Todd Bowley seems like he was playing a game of Football Manager at one point with who he's bringing in. The likes of Man United have done far better than I thought they would. I think Casemiro's been probably one of the best signings in the Premier League.
It's got goals in him as well,
in
which
the
is
summer.
surprising.
Yeah, he's popped up on a few occasions. And as for Newcastle, I mean, I don't think anyone expected to have the season that they've had. I mean, I said Newcastle can beat anyone in the league at St James's Park, and I think they've really proved that this season. We've seen some cracking atmospheres in there. So what do you think about Newcastle?
I mean, I could go on for ages. I'm
know.
probably more a little bit interested in this one to flip it back, because I think Newcastle do fantastic next season as well. We've obviously overachieved, we've done fantastic, but from an outside perspective, how would you look at Newcastle this season? Obviously fantastic, but what would you put it down to?
I mean, I would just put it down to the fans, the atmosphere, and Eddie Howe, and what he's been able to transform some players. The likes of Almiron, Isaacs came in, had a bit of a worry about his price tag. What a player he's been. I mean, his goal against Everton was up for goal this season. I think Murphy just slotted in when he.
Oh, it was the other way around. So he actually got the assist. So he was leaving people
he
on.
slotted it into Murphy or something who scored. But I mean, yeah, I just think in general the fans have been sensational at St James's Park this season, and there's a real, you can feel it from going to university here, there's a real like togetherness in the city, completely different to what it was like pre Mike Ashley. But yeah, I mean, what a season.
So we've
Champions
got a
League.
Newcastle fan and we've got a Liverpool fan sitting here. Who would you say honestly is going to finish higher next season? It's tough because we don't know what's happening in the transfer window and everything.
It's going to be really tough. I'm going to have to back Liverpool, obviously. It just depends who we both bring in. I mean,
where do you expect Liverpool to finish next season? That's probably a.
Well, I expect it to be back in the top four, most definitely, and I expect us to get to the further stages of the Europa League, if not win it. The finals in Dublin, which is quite close to where I'm from, so that'd be nice. I've heard a few shouts of maybe a Newcastle-Liverpool Europa League final, which would be some atmosphere. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how Newcastle do in the Champions League and who they come up against.
Are you expecting not getting Champions League to hurt Liverpool? We've seen Salah come out and he a cryptic message, shall we say. Is there any doubts that any players might leave, or does it not seem to impact any of them, do you reckon?
Well, I don't.
And signing players as well.
I think we've still got the pulling power of signing players just because of what we're about and Klopp and what we've done previously. But I think it'll really hurt some of them that they're not playing regular Champions League football. But then you could argue it might motivate them to go on and do even better. As we've seen, we knew what this Liverpool team were capable of. But I think next season could be one of the most competitive Premier Leagues we've seen in a very long time. With Chelsea having a new manager, Spurs have just got the Celtic manager today. United are looking to challenge, Arsenal looking to challenge, Liverpool need to come back, Newcastle, there's so many more teams that
What do you see for Newcastle as well? Where do you reckon Newcastle's going to finish? Obviously we're going to have Champions League, which we never had that distraction this season.
Yeah.
Going to have to get a load of players, but is that too much to ask to get Champions League next season?
I think if I told you at the start of the season that Newcastle would even get a top 7 finish, you would have took that in a heartbeat. And I mean, I think anywhere floating about there, I think if they get a good Champions League run, it doesn't really matter where they finish in the league, top 10. But it's so hard to predict with the whole transfer window going ahead, and I mean anything could change. But I think Newcastle will definitely be up there again next season. Yeah.
So before we talk a little bit about next season, we'll look back at some of our other highlighted choices here. So West Ham, we had 8th and 9th. I had 9th, you had 8th. What a shocker of a season. Probably on par with Chelsea for expectations to how far dropped they were.
Yeah. I mean, I said they might struggle being in the Conference League, and I probably should have went a bit more with that with my predictions. I had them in 8th, just below Newcastle. I think the signing of Paqueta from Lyon, who was a target for Newcastle as well. You thought
season of two horse for him as well. Really, first half really struggled, second half.
And the season before, I think West Ham finished 7th. Got them in the Conference League, but yeah, I think those away days that they might have struggled with this season. I don't really know what's went wrong, and I can see Declan Rice.
Is it Europe? Is it the more matches? Because we've seen it at Newcastle a few seasons ago when we had Alan Pardew. When you try to do it with not a small but like a medium-sized squad, obviously you've got Liverpool, Man City, you've got the 2 squads almost. Is it a case of it's all down to that, or is it what? Because I listened to some of the phone-ins, and the fans of West Ham seem to want him out, even though he's in the cup final, purely because of the league position.
Yeah. I mean, well, I've seen talk about, for example, Liverpool in the Europa League. Are they going to play their first team? Do they play their B team in the group stages? It's very hard to balance the European football alongside of things. And as I've already said, a common trend this season has been the teams in Europe have dropped, and the teams out of Europe, the likes of Brighton, Villa, have only gone up.
Yeah. Well, we've got some other bad shouts as well. So if we look at the teams that went down in particular, so Leicester first, I had 13, so I predicted them for an okay sort of season. You had Leicester 15th, so a lot closer than I did. Obviously got battered this season. Leeds, I had 14th, and you had 12th. Yeah, what's gone wrong there? What went wrong?
Well, I think the reason I had them that high was just because of the players they brought in from the Red Bull clubs. And
Bamford's had a shocker as well. I think that's
Bamford. Yeah, I remember a miss. Maybe it was the second last game of the season. He just hasn't been on it for Leeds this season. But there's obviously a lot better people to talk about that than myself. But I remember saying I really like Jesse March, and I just think it's been sort of collective team of individuals really, and haven't really been able to find that rhythm in the league this season.
Yeah, I think when you've got a good striker and he's not in form, that's going to cost your league position a lot.
Well, I remember you saying about Calvert-Lewin at Everton. If he wasn't firing, then they would struggle, and we've seen how.
Well, it was the lack of goals for Everton.
Missed him this season,
that nearly came true. And then Southampton, we pretty much had both near the bottom for that one. I had 15th. You obviously had relegated.
Yeah.
Out of the teams that go down, are they probably the best prepared? I say that because they've had a consistency sort of level of fighting relegation every season and stuff. They've not really got any star players other than Ward-Prowse, who's maybe going to jump ship, so it's not going to upset the team. Leeds have probably got Harrison and a few others that are going to leave. You've got Leicester, who have got a ton of their players who are going to leave.
Yeah.
How do you see the three teams that go down next season into the Championship? Do you reckon any of them might come up or be favourites to come up?
Well, I mean, the Championship's probably one of the hardest leagues in the world, and we've seen teams drop down and struggle before. I mean, Sunderland back-to-back relegations, but I think Leicester will be fine. I think Leeds might struggle. Again, it depends who comes in, who comes out. Southampton could struggle. I think Leicester would probably be my favourite to win that, because
released a lot of players. I just had a look the other day, and a lot of their players.
Choose away to Atletico Madrid.
Yeah.
But I think if they get good money for Maddison, Barnes could stay, but they need to just invest it right. And
could you see Barnes staying in the Championship? Do you need to stick around for that?
Depends what he's offered. I mean, I don't know.
A lot of clubs will be coming in for
if
him.
If they're going to keep hold of Dean Smith or not, no one's really sure about that. But I think Leicester will definitely be the favourite to win the Championship next season.
Yeah. I think again, this is the early prediction, so a lot's going to happen in the transfer window, very early one. So discussing next season then a little bit. So we went through our predictions. So next season, again, we're doing this before the transfer window, so it's very hard to tell, and this is obviously going to change a lot. So, top 4 next season. What's the very early prediction? It's got to be Man City for number 1, isn't it? That's got to be nailed on. Are you expecting Arsenal number 2, or do you see one of Liverpool, Man U, or something creeping up? Or Newcastle?
I think an outside shout for myself, a bit of a bold prediction, would be Chelsea. I really think if Poch can come and get them playing like good football, and they've so many talented players in Chelsea. I mean, I think they're in for an inside shot at top 4, but you could give it to anyone. I think Spurs might take a bit of time to settle in with their new manager, and especially if Harry Kane leaves. But I think I'd maybe say City, Arsenal, Liverpool, United, Chelsea, all battling out for it next season. I think Newcastle will also be in there, but they might struggle with Champions League football. It's so hard to say. What about yourself?
And this is the thing, that it's almost impossible, because we don't know how many bodies are going to come in for Newcastle. What's coming in, that's going to have a huge impact. I think if I had to say right now, I would definitely say Man City. I think they're probably going to walk it for the next few years. I can't really see anyone stopping them. They're only going to get stronger, not weaker. If I had to go for the other ones, I would possibly say, and if I had to say order, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Arsenal again. I think I could see them having a good transfer window. They've signed obviously Trossard in January, all these other players. I think they've got a lot of competition now. Yeah. I think if they had a couple more players, I think if they had a better centre back rather than Rob Holding, I think they might have been able to mount a better title challenge. It might not have
Saliba injury really affected them towards the latter stages.
Haven't got a competition for places, and I think they'll sort that out with the Champions League money this season. So I would say Arsenal second. If I had to go third, I would probably say Liverpool. I'll give you guys a shout. I think carrying on from last season, I think he's changed formation. I think a lot of the start of the season was Trent. He had a bad start. I think he's got him playing a little bit. I could see him fixing the errors with the midfield this season. And they've got goals all over.
They just knew how to play against us, and I think Klopp sort of knew that the season was gone, which is why we saw Trent come in and drop, playing that sort of anchor in the midfield, and that position seemed to work really well for him. But I think I remember him saying that he didn't want to do it without having enough time to get the team all playing like that. But I think with a full pre-season under us and a few good midfield signings, then I think we should be back at least challenging for third, second.
I don't think you need a lot of players really. It's just a central midfielder, maybe another high quality defender.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
maybe fullbacks, a
Yeah.
cover for fullbacks just in case. I mean, you've been lucky to not have injuries, but if you did have injuries, it's a huge miss. I think if I had to go for the other fourth slot as well, I'd probably go for Newcastle.
Yeah.
I'd back Newcastle.
I'd back that.
I think I'd wait until the 31st to really nail that on, but I think we might have a better transfer market than Man U. I think we've got the momentum. I think a lot depends on what happens for Man U. I think we might be fighting out. I think Chelsea, I think their confidence is going to be a bit fragile.
Yeah.
So I think we'll need to wait and see what happens. Tottenham, really, I'm going to sound weird saying this. I think Tottenham would probably be better off without Harry Kane because I think if they cash in on him now, the amount of money that they'll be able to reinvest, they've got so many weak positions. Centre back,
Yeah.
they need to replace Lloris. I don't think they're going to be able to afford all of what they need to do without that Harry Kane money. Maybe if they got someone like Ivan Toney, obviously not Ivan Toney with his band, someone like that, that money would probably be better reinvested. But if they kept him, he's going to walk out for nothing next season. That's crazy.
I think Spurs are in for maybe a couple of seasons just sitting below the top six. I wouldn't really put them up there with the likes of Arsenal, Man City, United at the minute. But yeah, I think as for Man United, again, it just depends who they bring in really. But I think City, Arsenal will be right up there again. And as for the others, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see how the likes of Newcastle, Chelsea, United all finish.
I think touching on Man U a little bit, I think what's going to really boil down is who they get as a striker, but if they can turn their wingers round. So a lot of their form this season has dipped off because Anthony, who was supposed to be wonders, one of the best in the league, he's dipped off, hasn't looked a great signing, especially for the money. And then you've got Sancho as well. I think if they get them two firing next season, what a team that'll do.
I mean, if United go on and sign Harry Kane, I think we could be talking for a team that could be challenging for the Premier League with, I mean, add his goals to their season and they'll be right up there. So yeah.
I think what he would bring as well, leadership as well to the group as well.
Would you give him the armband if you went?
You've got to really, haven't you?
Yeah.
I think wherever he goes, he probably takes the armband. He's one of these players who leads by example, and really for me, that's who you would want to give the armband to, rather than someone who shouts or whatever. For me, that's
I think
more of a leader.
United need to just get rid of some of their. I think De Gea's time is up at Man United.
Big money,
maybe
big
could have
mistakes.
saved that goal in the FA Cup final, and you maybe get something to him. He's been linked to the Saudi clubs somewhere, but yeah, I mean, if they bring in Harry Kane, then it'll definitely be scary, especially as a Liverpool fan.
Yeah, so some of the other ones to touch on for next season, very, very early prediction again, just point that out. Tottenham, so we touched on them a little bit there. So they've got a new manager, literally just been appointed. What do you make of that? Comes from Celtic.
I mean, I don't know much about him apart from he's Australian, but he's won the league with him, and he seemed to have signed a few of these Japanese players from abroad, and he's got them playing football. I've watched a few of their games this season against Rangers especially, and they look a really good side, and he's got the experience of winning things, as we've seen. He's won the league with them.
But is that much of an accomplishment though? Because it is almost a two-horse race.
We saw with
up
Gerrard,
there.
he came in and he couldn't handle the Premier League as you said.
Brendan
he
Rodgers
didn't know what was
is
his
probably
best
another
starting
one
11.
for being harsh.
Yeah, Rodgers had lesser up, and then they just came straight back down. But I mean, as you said, losing Harry Kane, it'll be interesting to see how they do. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we've then got Tottenham. So you've hinted you expect them to have a good start of the season.
Spurs,
or a good
did you
season.
say?
Spurs, Chelsea.
Oh,
Chelsea. Yeah,
I
sorry.
you said Tottenham there.
So with Chelsea, yeah, you've said they're going to have a good season. I think for me, a lot of it's going to depend on the transfer window and then the start. I think if they have a bad start of the season, I think a lot of them players are playing with fractured confidence, even though they're superstars. So for me, I would say 5th or 6th. I think they'll have a good season, but I think it's possibly big ask. But again, this is almost impossible task with these ones in particular, trying to predict it before the transfer window. So West Ham. Got no European football. They might if they win the cup, but
they could be in the Europa League.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they'll win the Conference League final, and I don't know if David Moyes will be there next season. And
even if he wins, do you think that'll keep his job? He'd be one of the
well,
most
as you said,
successful
West Ham
managers.
fans have been calling out for him to leave for a while now. But I mean, if Declan Rice goes, they'll get some amount of money for him, and they could reinvest that well. But yeah, I could see West Ham finishing a good bit higher than they did this season anyway.
Top 10, do you reckon, or just below that?
I can see in and around 10th.
Yeah. So then we've got the 3 promoted teams. So Burnley absolutely smashed the Championship last season.
Yeah.
Sheffield United had dips and nearly didn't get into the automatic, and Luton obviously were the
Luton
massive
Town,
surprise.
yeah.
So Burnley, are we expecting them to have a big season next season, do you reckon?
I mean, they've had such a transformation under Company. They've gone from this sort of like Brexit style 4-4-2 under Sean Dyche to this completely different style of football, and Company's brought a few of the Belgians over with them from Anderlecht. I can see them doing quite well and staying up. I think Sheffield United and Luton are sort of the ones that worry me. But yeah, sometimes we've seen before teams come up, get a mid-table finish, and then they just go straight back down the next season. But I definitely want to get to Luton next season as an away day.
They're one of the out of the three that go up. Do you reckon they'll finish higher then?
Burnley?
Yeah.
I think they'll finish higher, yeah.
I think 100%. I think what he might do is he might use his connections to Man City, get a few of their young uns, Palmer's and a few others, who'll probably come in. You know, you're going to get first team.
Even on loan.
Yeah, and they're going to be playing against Premier League rivals. I think they had double barrel name, who's a Man City defender as well. He seems a really good defender as well. I think he'll stick there. I think basically it's just a cedar club almost for Man City it could turn into.
Yeah, it seems like it, yeah. As for Sheffield United, I mean, we've seen them come up and down like a yo-yo before almost. They could struggle, but again, it's hard to know. I haven't really watched much of the three teams in the Championship this season, but I know how far Burnley won up by, you know.
Yeah, I had an eye on it a little bit last season because obviously I follow Sunderland and Middlesbrough, like to see how they do and stuff. And like I say, Middlesbrough almost seemed like they were going to catch Sheffield United up at one stage. So I think when you're not dominant in the Championship, it's always going to leave questions. They're going to have a really big transfer window, I think, to stay up. And Luton, I think at the minute, you've got to predict them for the whipping boys of the Premier League. Obviously, it could all change. Maybe they'll do a whole Fulham and Nottingham Forest and have a different team. But
see, I was saying to a couple of my friends, whoever comes up between Luton and Coventry, I'm going to back them for a top 10 finish the next season. I just think...
You want to take a bet with that one?
yeah, let's do it. I think, I mean, everyone's talking about the first game of the season, Luton home to Arsenal, that they pick up a win, they go on a run. I mean, just anything can happen. They've got this big 100-odd million that they've earned from promotion. It'll be a really interesting season, both in the Premier League and the Championship.
Yeah. Some of the other noticeable predictions to ask for next season as well. So, Everton, they've survived the last 2 seasons by the skin of their neck almost.
Yeah.
The fan base have come out and demanded that the owner changes hands, spends more money. Do you think they're going to spend much money? Do you see the same next season? Or
well,
what?
I think they have to, although I recall something being about financial fair play for the
new stadium they're going into this season.
Yeah, they really needed to stay up for that new stadium. I mean, if they'd gone into the Championship in the first season in their new stadium, it would have been a bit of a disaster, and I think the owner would have been asked some serious questions. But I think they'll maybe get back into consistency and use their new ground to their advantage and turn it into a bit of a fortress.
Prediction if you had to say 1 to 20?
Everton, just below the top 10.
16, 17 sort
13th,
of thing.
12th.
Okay, yeah. And then who we got next? Palace. So
yeah,
that's
we
again a
haven't
season of
touched
2
Palace,
halves.
Brighton, etc. I remember you mentioned about Vieira at the start of the season.
I think he should have been kept. But I can't argue with what's happened afterwards. Obviously, they've had a cracking second half of the season, but I thought it was a very unfair dismissal on Vieira. I think, looking back at it, I think he got sacked off the back of a few bad results to the top 6, but really, what do owners expect?
Yeah, I mean, Hodgson's come in and he's done a great job. They went on a bit of a running streak and they pretty much cemented themselves with a few games to go. But I think players like Eze, Olise, and have been really crucial for them this season. Zaha's been a bit hit and miss with a few injuries. Yeah, I don't know if he'll be shifted on or not. But I mean, Palace have sort of become one of them good teams towards the end of the season that have been hard to play against.
I've got them for top 10 next season. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think, again, it just depends on signings, etc.
Yeah, I think it depends on the Zaha situation as well. I mean, on a free, there's going to be a lot of people that will put big money down for him. If he leaves, I mean, obviously you mentioned Eze and a few others. They're probably not going to miss him as much as they would have done at the start of last season, but big miss if they do.
Yeah.
Villa. So we touched on this a little bit. The new manager's come in. He's working with almost the same 11 and he's getting a tune out of every single one of them almost. He's improved everyone, the quality's there. big season next season, you reckon?
Yeah, well, I said even when Gerald was in our previous video that they have the players to challenge for the Europa League, and that's exactly what they've done. They've gone out and they've secured, I think, a Conference League position just below Brighton. I mean, Unai Emery's come in and he's done a great job. He's got Watkins getting double figures, and some of their signings, Buendia, etc., are finally paying off, and I think they can keep that consistency running. Definitely a top 10 for them next season.
Even some of the ones that were there, I'd always like McGinn, but he just didn't seem the same player at the start of the season. New manager, he's got them all, kind of a little bit like Eddie Howe. It seems like it's a good manager, good coach, getting the best out of what you've got. So I mean, Newcastle were linked with him before Eddie Howe as well.
They were,
so
and
there's obviously
he's
a lot
been
of
given
potential.
the armband, I think, but Unai Emery, he's done a magical job with Aston Villa, and I'm sure they're very happy with his appointment.
I would say 8th.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of going to predict that the teams that are back in Europe might drop out, like the likes of Brighton,
who haven't got
Villa,
the
etc. So I can see definitely top 10, but maybe just below 6th, 7th, like 8th, 9th sort of territory.
Yeah, and then you mentioned them there, Brighton. You expect them to drop a little bit? I mean, they've been fantastic this season.
I mean,
absolutely
ridiculous. They're just like the foundations that every team seem to be following now with their transfer policy. I think I talked about Cucurella being a massive miss for them, but they've brought in Estupiñán, and
Bissouma as well.
One of their best players this season, Estupiñán. But yeah, Bissouma leaving, they've replaced him, McAllister, who now looks like a Liverpool player, but De Zerbi, what a job he's done. I think Pep Guardiola said in a press conference recently that sort of people are sort of following his tactics and his style, and I remember seeing a video with Lewis Dunk showing how they play it out from the back and get these triangles going. So it seems like they've all played into his philosophy and they really understand the manager, and everyone thought when Potter left they might, but they've done the opposite. They've gone up and Chelsea have gone down, so no complaints.
Yeah, I mean, football's an easy game sometimes. A lot of tactics and stuff that you have, but a lot of it's down to transfers, and they seem to be almost Leicester-esque back in the day, where they were picking up Kante, Mahrez, unearthing all these gems. They got Mitoma, who this season
he was at university, I think, five years ago, and what a player he's been this season.
Yeah, and do you see they're going to sell McAllister? It seems. Are they going to capitulate a little bit, or do you reckon they'll use that money and strengthen and get even better?
Well, I think De Zerbi's come out and said Caicedo and McAllister will be leaving in the summer, but I don't think he would say that without having replacements for them. We've seen the young lad who got goal this season in Cisco, I think.
Yeah.
Scored that cracker goal, but I mean, I think we've probably not even heard of them. The names that they're going to bring in will come in, and I think the owners will trust De Zerbi to really turn anyone into a Premier League player.
Oh, I mean, if we use Leicester, or I mean, you could use a couple of Southampton. They had a reputation of having these star players, then selling them, and not really replacing them. It's always a big ask when you have star players to just expect, we got 60 million, we'll just buy someone else. They might not necessarily hit the ground. Now, Southampton and Leicester both this season have been relegated, and they were known for selling every transfer window almost. Do you not see that? I mean, Brighton seem, like I said, they've got a great scouting network, so maybe people aren't as worried, but do you not see that might happen?
It seemed like Southampton and Leicester just didn't have the transfer windows at the time that you would have expected them to have to bring players in, but I mean, I think Brighton will be absolutely fine for a good few seasons now with their recruitment, their manager, the players. It just seems like anyone who leaves, they use that money and spread it out across a wide variety of players, which comes into squad depth, if you've talked about that they'll need for next season in the Europa League.
And the youth that they've got as well, that Ferguson looks ridiculous.
From Ireland, I think he got his Ireland debut in the last couple of months there, and but I think Brighton will be absolutely fine.
Yeah, see big things, fellow Irish guy, you reckon, in his future? Got to be, if he's doing it at 19 or whatever he is. He's got to be.
Yeah, he was linked to some of the big clubs, but I think he's signed a long-term contract there. I mean, young player, we've seen glimpses of him, but I think 19. I mean, what a player,
Yeah. If we look at some of the other teams, and we'll pick some others out. So we've got Brentford. Now, Brentford have got the Ivan Toney ban. Now, if you'd asked us this at the start of the season without Ivan Toney, this is one of the reasons why I thought they would struggle. They do okay without him. How do you see their season going without him until January?
Well, again, it depends. Are they going to bring someone in on loan to play? Are they going to bring in someone permanently to? I think they have to sign someone of sort of that top 10 Premier League standard, but
6-month loan would probably suit everyone, wouldn't it, really?
It would, but I'm not sure. I think it could be a season where they might struggle, as you said at the start of this season. But yeah, again, they've got some great players. Some of the Danish ones in midfield have really they're looking to sell Raya for a club record fee, who I think might go to Spurs. But yeah, they seem to Thomas Frank's a great manager. They seem to have it going pretty well. Brentford.
One of the smallest budgets in the division. Yeah. How do you see them then 1 to 20 where you got them?
I mean, if they finished, where did they finish this season? They finished 9th. I can see them dropping a wee bit further down the league at that point with the absence of Tony. But I mean, I would still have them 12th, 13th ish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd probably say 14th, 15th. Yeah. So not too dissimilar that then. Fulham, so they've had a cracking season, mainly down to Mitrovic, who at the start of the season had doubters over can he perform. We see him championship level. He played at Newcastle.
Yep.
He's done wonders for them. I know he's getting a big ban as well as Ivan Toney, but he's been crucial to their season. How do you see them next season? Can they keep a hold of him and will they progress?
I mean, I think I mentioned in our previous video about Marco Silva being a good manager, and I mean from the first game of the season they drew with us, Mitrovic getting in the score sheet. I think, as long as they keep him firing, they should be fine. Yeah.
And then we've got Wolves. Now, Wolves have had a horrendous start of the season. It looked like they might get relegated. They've done okay since. How do you see their season going next?
Lopetegui coming in seems to have got them playing a really good football. Neves leaving could be a bit of a miss for them. I think it all depends who they bring in with that money, but
they've got Matinho as well, who's getting a bit older.
34, 35, yeah. I think I would be a bit more concerned for Wolves next season than I think there's something going on with Lopetegui and the board at the minute. They're not agreeing with their transfer policy and who they're bringing in.
We've seen that happen with Leicester last season as well, where you could tell between the lines with Rodgers.
But out of some of the teams we've talked about, I would be a bit more concerned for Wolves next season and where they might end up.
Yeah, and then Liverpool. So we've mentioned this quite a bit. Where would you position them next season if you had to put a number on it?
Well, as I said, I expect us to be back in the top 4. There's no question about that. But it's so hard to put a number on it. I mean, if Nunez actually starts converting some of the chances that he had throughout the season, then there's no reason why we shouldn't be back challenging for first and second. I'll say third. I'll say third.
Right. That will leave it there then. So we'll do a follow-up video hopefully at the end of the transfer window. We'll look ahead.
See how much has changed there.
I think a lot will change. I'm expecting a big transfer window for a lot of clubs. It's almost impossible to tell now. So we'll have a look, see if we do as horrendous as we did this year. Didn't do as horrendous maybe as we thought. Obviously there's exceptions.
I think we'll give a proper 1 to 20 when the transfer window's over.
Yeah. I think I'd probably rate my predictions as a D minus if we're going school grades.
Yeah, maybe go a D plus then.
Yeah. Yeah, well I think we totaled it up, so for anyone who's listening as well, you got 15 points and I got 13 points of the score, so you'd pipped us to that one. But
I'll aim for 20 for next season.
20 plus. Big shout. I'll go for 21 then. Right, okay then. Thank you very much if you're watching. Don't forget to like, follow and subscribe for future videos as well. And like I say, we'll do one at the end of the transfer window as well. Thank you very much, Lewis.
Yeah, no worries.
And there we go.